Welcome to another episode of Scary Stories with Kalila. I'm Kalila Smith, and joining me tonight is Allan Gilbreath, and we're going to be talking about crazy cryptids. And I've got a couple of scary stories to tell, and Allan is our resident skeptic. So every time I'm going to say something was supernatural or cryptid, he's going to debunk it, or he's going to try anyway.
Well,
But anyway,
it's
welcome, Allan.
somebody has to keep you on your toes.
Hey, let me tell you something. This experience that I had, and this was back in the late 80s. This was before I was working with any of this stuff. This is before you had cameras on your phones. And yeah, it was sometimes, I
Mhm.
guess, late 80s, early 90s. I was driving from Picayune, Mississippi back to New Orleans after a home party up there. And it was
Mhm.
very foggy, very, very foggy because you're coming over all of this water. It was in February, which is one of our foggy
Right.
months. So, they have a place, I don't know if you're familiar or not, but there's a place called the Honey Island Swamp. Now,
I've
the
been
Honey
there.
Island Swamp is
Mhm.
huge. It's absolutely huge. And when you hit the Honey Island Swamp, it is like a 5 mile stretch of interstate that there's no exit. There's no turnaround. You're going over the swamp and that's it. And that is a
Mhm.
terrifying swamp to begin with. I mean, it's creepy down in there. There's huge there's wild Russian boar. There's
Yes, there is.
hybrid pigs that are crossbred with the boar, and they're these weird swamp pigs that are down in there, and that's pretty scary. And then they swim. Then of course you've got the alligators and the snakes and the
Yep.
usual, swampy things on top of it, which is
All
pretty
the usual
terrifying.
critters.
The
Yeah.
usual critters. But having grown up here, I also grew up with the legends of the Honey Island Swamp Monster. Back in the 1970s, there was a man who supposedly came up with a footprint of the
Yes.
Honey Island Swamp Monster. And this is
Mhm.
when, Boggy Creek had come out, the movie, and
Mhm.
the whole Bigfoot thing was a big deal. Well, many years later, of course, here I was driving home, and I guess it had to be about between midnight and 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm in a minivan because I've driven a
Right.
minivan forever because I've got the kids, the grandkids, and all that stuff. So I'm driving the minivan, 70 miles an hour down the interstate in the fog. You cannot see. I can't even see as far as my headlights. It is a thick, heavy fog.
Mm.
But suddenly, I see something in the middle of the dotted line. I was in the right lane, and this was like right smack in the middle of the right and the left lane. Now, I go past this thing. I went past this thing pretty quick, and if this thing would have moved over 6 inches, I would have hit it. Now, let me explain to you what I saw, because this is the scary part. I mean, this sent a chill, because there's nothing I could do. I mean, this day and age, everybody would have been taking pictures or taking video. There's nothing I could do. It was like, okay.
Right.
And I saw it, and I was like, what in the world was that? Now, no sooner could I think that thought, the smell hit me. Now, mind you, it's
Mm.
February, but it's still kind of warm, so I had my window rolled down. I got hit with that pungent smell. It smelled
Right.
like a wet dog. Very musty,
Mhm.
gamey kind of, wet, dirty dog smell. Now, here's the interesting part, though. I only saw two legs. I specifically saw two legs, and they were pretty big, and they were hairy. And when I say hairy, the only thing I could think of that it kind of sort of looked like, have you ever seen like a sheep that's in dire need of a grooming, and they've
Yes.
got that
Yes.
dirty kind of
Mhm.
wool that's it's dirty, and you can see like sticks in it and leaves. It looked like if a sheep went rolling around in the swamp, and it was like, what in the world? But it was gray. It was like a gray color, light
Okay.
gray color, and it was two legs, and it was clearly hairy. Okay, and I'm in a minivan and I only see its legs. So I'm thinking this thing has to tower over my
Mm.
van. It's pretty big. And the first thing I think of course, is, I mean, my heart's pounding, I'm breathing heavy. And it's like, it was the Honey Island Swamp. What else could it be? And then I'm thinking, I got to go back and look at it. And I see the sign, next exit 5 miles. And I'm like,
Right.
okay, breathe, breathe, breathe. And it's like, okay, if I go all the way 5 miles and come back and then loop back around, what if I hit it? And it's twice the size of my van. It's like, okay, I can't go back. I don't know what it is. We hope this was pre-internet. You couldn't go
Yeah.
home
Oh
and
yeah. Oh
Google
yeah. Yeah.
something. This was pre-internet, and I got home and I walked in and I told I told my husband, I said, "You're not going to believe what happened," and of course he didn't. So he starts trying to name all the animals that it could be. And he goes, well, maybe it was a collar. And I'm like, okay, let's do this again. It was 2 legs. It stood upright,
Right.
erect, on 2 legs. And they were fur. Well, maybe it was an ostrich. Okay. No, it had fur on its legs. It was not a
Oof.
bird. And he's like, well, maybe it's
Yeah.
an emu. And it's like, okay, I'm going to really slap you because you're not listening when
Mm.
I'm telling you it has hair on the legs. He goes, well, maybe it was a bear. Okay, we don't have polar bears here, so in order for it to have been a bear, it would have had to have been a polar bear. It was light colored, and it's like I cannot identify. And so he's like, "So you think it's a swamp monster?" I said, "I don't know what I think it is. I'm just saying that I saw an animal
Right.
that I cannot identify. Not saying it's a honey island swamp monster, just saying I saw an animal that I cannot identify, and it couldn't have been a primate because, uh, I mean, primates
We
don't
don't
have
have
that
primates here.
woolly.
Right. Right.
Well, you could, in essence. I mean, they've got the North American apes in the Everglades. I mean, but they're brown.
Well, we
It's
have
a type of
apes in the
chimpanzee.
Everglades, but we have
They're
apes in the
brown.
Everglades because of Johnny Weissmuller movies that were
Well,
made
that's what
way
I'm
back
saying.
then.
They were dumped there. But we've had on the North Shore, people have had emu forms. I mean, I told you I grew up around the block from a guy with a
Yeah.
lion, and he moved to the North Shore, and he had one of those kind of crazy zoos at his place. He had the lion, and he had giraffes, and he had all kind of stuff over
Yeah.
there. So, I mean, it wasn't too far. So for him to be guessing these animals, he's like, well, it probably came from one of those weird farms over there, and it escaped. And I said, but it didn't match the color or the type of fur that anything, it
Right.
couldn't have been a sheep. And he's like,
No.
well, it was probably a
No. No.
cow. And it's like, it's not
How
a
about two big
cow.
old legs sitting underneath there? It's not.
It was, and I always, and it's like that image of that thing, like burned into my brain. And I've
Well,
never ever been able to identify, but it had all the classic symptoms, you might say, of being a Bigfoot because you had what it looked like, you had the
hmm
size, and then the very distinct odor that people describe. It was
right.
all there. Everything was there. So now, folks, Allan is not only a skeptic, but he is a wildlife expert. This man has worked with wildlife and wildlife rescues and all that
Mhm.
good stuff his entire life. He's not afraid of anything, ever.
No.
And he doesn't
No.
believe in any of this stuff, ever. So, Allan.
Well,
And don't say
right.
it was a raccoon, because I know it
No.
wasn't.
Oh no. 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 See, number one rule of being a real skeptic, not just a naysayer. You can never tell somebody you did not have that experience. You absolutely did. Now, what that experience turns out to be, that's where the argument comes in.
Right.
And I'll give you a couple of my own case in points. All right. I am a wee tiny lad, all of maybe 4 or 5 years old. And my father decided that we were going to drive across Texas. Being a native Texan, we started in Houston and we were heading to Amarillo. For any of you that feel like getting out Google Maps or something like that, you'll discover this is like driving across Europe. This is like a 10, 12-hour drive. And we got out really in the desert. I mean, there's several parts of Texas that are quite wet, beautiful pine trees. There are several parts of Texas that are quite dry, lovely mesquite. We had hit one of those stretches that looked like Arizona. It was cactus, scrub brush, that kind of stuff. And way over to, and I distinctly remember, way, way, way off to the left, I saw a big spotted cat running. And I mean running. It's running towards the road. And it's running and running and running. And I'm banging on my father. Look, cat, big cat. Oh my God, big cat. And here this gargantuan, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's the biggest thing I've ever seen in my life. And this thing sails across the highway and keeps right on running up into the foothills over there. It was so impressive, my father had to stop the car, smoke an extra cigarette, and keep driving. He had never seen anything like it before either. And when we were describing it to family members, of course, we were told, y'all had sunstroke. Y'all was just out in the desert too long. You saw a mirage, wasn't it? Well, it's like 30 years later, right? 30 years later, you're watching the nature channel of something, and they come up to tell you, oh, by the way, in West Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona, we've been picking up jaguars on our trail cams.
Wow. Yeah.
And as a grown up, you see the picture of a jaguar and you go, I swear to God, that's what I saw in the wilds of West Texas back in 1967 when, and you have that experience. So I understand that you saw something that wasn't supposed to be there.
Yes.
I saw something that definitely didn't exist. But, then you get verification years later. Oh, by the way, they've probably been here a while. They're just good at hiding from us. But when you're the one lone car in the middle of this highway, in the middle of nowhere, they don't care about you. They're doing their thing. It's not like they're driving, you're on I-40 and there's bumper to bumper traffic. Another case in point, we went fishing one time, and again, I'm like 5. So if you want to know what's wrong with me, you're finding out. We go down to, my father worked for an oil and gas company in Texas, like everybody, at era, everybody did. Mm-hmm. We go down there, and this big log showed up at the edge of the water, so I threw some pine cones at it until it sank back down. Went and told my dad that, there's a log, if you'll throw pine cones at it, it'll sink.
Gator?
About a 10-foot alligator. So you're 5 years old, they're throwing pine cones at it.
Now, where was this?
That was south of Houston.
Well, yeah, I mean they have alligators.
We actually lived at the end of a street that was adjacent to the Buffalo Bayou. So when you're a small child, you grow up kind of like Tarzan, and you go hunting mud puppies and snakes, turtles, and when you're 4, 5, 6 years old, you got on a pair of cutoffs. And you are little Tarzan. You just live down in these things, and you catch stuff, and you bring it home, and you terrorize your parents with it because you accidentally let it loose on the patio, and it can't get out. So I
don't like mud puppies. Those things are gross. I saw one time.
Oh my God, they're hilarious.
Oh, they're scary. That was creepy.
When you're a little kid and you walk over and bug the animals by poking at them until they get so mad they bite you on the finger, then you can go around and get lizard fingers, and you can have like 5 lizards on your hand, and then you go walk around and terrorize the other children because you're lizard man now. So. I'm thinking back, another, again, 4 or 5 years old. My father drugged me all over Texas that year. We stopped by a friend of his that has a longhorn ranch. And if you're 4 years old and you've never seen a longhorn cow before, this thing's bigger than a bus. They're gargantuan cows, and they have horns that go from Texas to Tennessee. Wow. I mean, they're just huge. When you're a grown person and you see one of these things, you're impressed. I don't like dogs. And I kept telling my father about the doggy over by the other doggies in the pen. And my father was like, good God, child, you're making me crazy. So we go over, and it turns out his friend was working with wildlife officers at the time and had a pair of wolves. What I was seeing was the wolf that did not exist in the state of Texas. But there was a feral wolf hanging around those pens because he had been scented in. He smelled other wolves and came in to check it out. Eventually, now see, this is one of these things you find out years later talking to your parents. Oh, yeah, you remember we were at Fred's place and you said he had that weird dog? Yeah. Well, they finally caught, I don't know if I told you or not, they caught it. It turned out to be a wolf. And you're like, really? So what you're trying to tell me is you let your 5-year-old child go play with a wild wolf is what you're trying to tell me. You know,
That's scary.
you're lucky to be alive. So welcome to the cryptid experience. The cryptid experience is anything, it's an anachronism, anything out of time or place.
Yeah, okay.
So you and I had a wonderful experience going to go ghost hunting in Natchez. And you are born and bred and raised in New Orleans.
Well, outside of New Orleans.
Yeah, well, but
I
you
mean,
are,
I'm not a city girl. No,
but you're a creature of that environment.
I'm a creature of yeah, swampy.
All right, but you know, I've lived all over the
Semi-rural.
country, and trust me, somebody living in Louisville does not comprehend Louisiana.
No, probably not.
They don't get that the bathroom is 300 years old. They don't get that. They don't get the iron railings. They don't get the things you take for granted.
Right.
So when these people come into a place that has them out of time and out of place, they become very sensitive to other things they don't recognize. So even something commonplace can become weird. So, all right, for instance, you used to keep a very large snake. Yes.
Yes.
Yep. So you had a big boa constrictor, well behaved for the most part, right?
Yeah, the first one I had was he was well conditioned. I say he was well conditioned because
So,
he was still a wild animal. I mean, you
yeah,
couldn't
he's still
really
a
be trained.
snake, but
He's still a
you
snake.
can
But
handle him and take care of him.
he was used to being handled,
Right.
and he was very well conditioned for handling and doing what he needed to do, which was, be a snake in a voodoo ritual. I mean, that was his job.
Right.
So he had a job.
But
He
now,
wasn't a pet. He had a job.
all right, so you're used to a snake,
I was used to that snake.
but you're used to a snake.
Yeah.
I mean, the average person walking around the street today is not used to hanging out with a 6 to 8 foot long tropical constrictor. So imagine what happens, and this is a true story from just about 5 years ago. What happens when you go over here into southern Arkansas, not too far from where I live in Memphis, and suddenly people begin seeing a giant snake, a kaiju, a giant man-eating size snake.
Wow.
Well, those are not from our, I know we blame a lot of things on Arkansas, but that ain't a part of Arkansas, right? Just saying.
Right. No, it's not. It's not. Yeah.
So here they bring a snake expert up from like Venezuela to figure this out. And it turns out to be a tropical constrictor, but it's somehow gotten into the environment there in southern Arkansas.
Was it an
And
anaconda?
this thing was like 15 feet long.
Was it an anaconda?
Was not an anaconda, thank goodness.
Yeah.
It was one of the pythons. I don't remember exactly which one.
Well, a constrictor. Boa.
It was a big constrictor, but could you imagine some poor farmer who's used to seeing maybe a cottonmouth or a black racer or a king snake, nothing more than 3 or 4 feet long and nothing you would ever touch. And suddenly he sees a 15-foot long snake sliding across the road and going into his pond.
Yeah, that's horrifying. That's a horrible thought.
That is a
That's
cryptid
scary.
experience
Yeah,
because
that's creepy.
you don't have anything in your mind to give you a point of reference about that. Well,
Yeah,
in
that's really scary.
Louisiana, and that, think about it. What happened to all those emus and ostriches and stuff when people discovered they weren't going to make millions of dollars?
I have no idea what happened to those things, but that there was an era in which everybody had on the North Shore was, a lot of people were over there with their emu farms and their
Right.
ostriches and all, and yeah, it just didn't
Right.
it didn't go well for them. It went very poorly for them. I
We
don't know
can't
what
even
happened
keep
to
up
them.
with our cats and dogs.
I don't know what happened to those
A
animals. I
lot of them
mean,
got loose.
okay, yeah,
There
well,
is now
yeah.
an emu problem in the southern United States. Can you imagine somebody from Kansas driving through Louisiana or South Mississippi or South Alabama and having a 6 foot tall bird that looks like the roadrunner out of a cartoon pass your car at 40 miles an hour?
Yeah, that would be pretty weird. That was creepy. But
How
again,
would
I
you
know that what I
explain that to
passed
somebody
was
back home in
not.
Kansas?
What's that?
How would you explain that to somebody back home in Kansas?
You're not in Kansas anymore.
Oof. Right. You and I know what an emu looks like. We know what an
Well, yeah,
ostrich looks like.
right.
But some poor guy driving down from Kansas or Ohio or Kentucky, all right, he saw one in the zoo or maybe on TV. This thing just passed the car.
Yeah, that would be pretty creepy. Yeah.
So, I mean, you just think about the cryptid experience. And I will freely admit, I am an avid cryptid hunter. Of somebody tells me we don't have wolves someplace, all right, I'll go sit in a deer stand all night long with a trail cam to see if you got wolves or not. I really, I know that's not terribly bright, but I do it.
Yeah,
Um,
I wouldn't want to do
yeah,
that.
Bigfoot. I'd be like a little dog chasing a car. What would happen if I caught it?
No, no.
But let's take a cryptid like Bigfoot, and if and honest to goodness, I think if somebody put, I'm trying to remember what the show was. They put it like this: with the amount of circumstantial evidence we have about a Bigfoot, we can convict him.
But nobody's ever captured one. Nobody's ever brought in a carcass. Nobody's ever bought, got a live one. Nobody's ever really gotten anything but a footprint.
Well,
Seriously,
see,
you would have something else, bones.
but
You'd
we
have
may have.
something.
See, here's the terrible, terrible thought. What if it's not an ape?
Well, I
What
mean,
if it's what if it's a member of the family? Well, honestly, if the reason all of these hair samples and all of these things all come back 95.5% human, is that, well, it's a relative.
either that is some joker in a costume. I mean,
No,
because we know that that's
no.
happened. We
See,
know that that's happened.
well, we know that we have the Joker in a costume,
Yeah.
but we know that the really good costume, like you see in Harry and the Hendersons, that costume cost a hundred
That's
thousand dollars.
yeah, that's high
And
dollar.
it's an
Yeah.
awesome costume. Trust me. If I had nothing but 100 grand lying around to do nothing with, I would have one of the world's greatest outfits, really. But a monkey suit you got down at XYZ costume
No,
rental
that's gonna be silly looking. It's
looks
gonna look
bad
fake.
enough to get you killed.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
Now,
but it looks silly. It's just it doesn't even look like fur.
it's terrible. My concern, like most other people talking about cryptids, is that of as we have discussed many times before, it's is there something there? There obviously has to be, but I don't think our assumptions about it are even close to correct.
I know. I mean,
Well,
I've been wondering about it ever since I saw this thing. I mean, I never gave it a lot of thought, because growing up with Honey Allen
Yeah.
Swamp Monster, and it's
Oh,
kind of like, okay, who knows,
well, can humans, the question is, can a human being be covered in hair? Absolutely.
They got some pretty hairy people
We
sometimes.
well, I mean, we
Or
have,
people
and
that
most
have big feet.
recently, a family in Mexico that are professional gymnasts in a circus. They have the Wolf Boys. They are completely covered in brown curly
Really?
fur from head to
Really?
toe. Yes. Very, very famous down there.
Huh.
One of them started shaving. The other one still is all, looks like a Pekingese walking around on 2 feet. Um, so can human beings be completely covered in fur? Absolutely. Can a human being be 8 foot tall?
That was going to be my question. Yeah, I mean,
Well,
come on.
Kalila, how tall are you?
5'5".
You're 5'5". And if Shaquem, the basketball player, or any of those guys walked over to you, how tall would they be at first guess?
Well, I don't know. They probably
They're
look like
gargantuan.
6.5, 7 feet tall. I mean,
We,
they would be
we,
huge.
you think about bumping into common, I mean, basketball players, common celebrities, human beings. Can they have a 16-inch foot? Shaquille O'Neal has a foot the size of Bigfoot.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he's a
So,
tall man. He's a very tall man. I mean,
but he's huge. I was just watching The Princess Bride the other night. Andre Rasmussen, 7'4",
oh, wow.
almost 500 pounds, and actually played Bigfoot on the $600 Man. But he was known as Andre the Giant, and
I was
he
gonna say
was
Andre the Giant. Yeah,
absolutely
that's a big
massive.
guy. That's a big guy.
Um, I met Richard Kyle once a million years ago at a convention for 2 whole seconds. And Richard Kyle, for people that don't know who I'm talking about, was Jaws on the Roger Moore
Yeah,
movies.
yeah. James Bond movies. Yes.
All right, I'm a big guy. I'm 6 foot. I am well over 250. I'm not a small man.
That guy's big.
Not by any stretch of the imagination.
That guy's big.
You want to feel like a child? Have somebody, and I'm 6 foot. He is 7'3".
oh wow.
He stands up, and your sense of proportion falls away
Wow.
after about 6'4", 6'5". Because when I have to do this, this is huge. So I see very easily how somebody could go, oh my God, it was 8 or 9 feet tall. If you're 5'5" and you just ran into anything over 6'5" in a strange place, especially a foggy night on the side of a road, your vision's not that great. Is this a completely plausible vision? Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
now I'm not comparing this to my height though. I am comparing this to the height of a minivan. And the
Well,
only thing that I could see were two legs. I saw
yes.
no torso, no torso
Yes.
whatsoever. So the
So,
legs were tall, the torso was above where my van
right.
was.
Right, but you couldn't
So
see.
that's
But
still big.
that's all you saw. You saw you saw like a blind
Legs.
person trying to identify an elephant.
Right, no, but I mean, I could identify what it was not. Let's just put
Right.
it that way. I could see what it
So,
was not. Now, I did have another instance in a different swamp,
mhm.
very
Well, but
similar,
that's the
but not the
cryptid
same.
experience.
Well, no,
'Cause-
this was very bizarre, and I wasn't the only one that
yeah,
saw it that time. I was in back in the day when I was doing every now and then I do a haunted swamp tour at
right,
night,
right.
and I had a group of Girl Scouts, a bunch of little girls in a boat, and a captain driving the boat, of course.
Hmm.
And we're out in the swamp at night. Mosquitoes everywhere. They got the
Oh yeah.
lights. They're doing this. They're looking for the frogs. They're looking for the alligator eyes and everything. And suddenly, about 12 feet in front of us, we see something crossing the bayou. Now, the something, I see a furry head coming up out of the water. So it basically had water up to here because there was no
Right,
neck. There was no neck. It was just this big, round,
right.
fuzzy head light colored again, that grayish, kind of a dirty gray looking
Yeah, yeah,
color.
yeah.
I could see that it was light color it wasn't brown, it was
Hmm.
definitely a lighter color. Just the head coming up, and it moved across the bayou, and then we lost it behind a tree, and we tried to catch up with it. It was gone, vanished. And when I first saw it, I before I could even say it, the captain said, "Do you see that?" And I said,
Oh yeah.
"Yeah, I do see that."
Oh yeah, I see that. Yeah.
And he asked me, he says, "What is it?" And of course I said, "You don't know?"
You, you're the captain.
You don't
I'm from
know.
the city. Right.
And this is the swamp that's like 2 miles from my house. So I'm
Yeah.
seeing this thing, and it's like, and it was like, that was very strange. And the first thing he said was, it didn't have a wake. I said, excuse
Thus
me?
implying
And he
it
says,
wasn't
it
moving
didn't
this
have a
way,
wake.
it was moving this way.
Correct. He says, it
Right.
didn't have a wake. And I went, excuse me? And he says, it didn't have a wake. He says, when an animal swims, it has a wake
Its
behind
body
it. You can
creates weight
see
behind it. Yes.
it has a wake behind it. And I said, so I don't understand. Of course, not being the captain of a boat, a swamp tour, I said, I don't get it. What does that mean? And he says, whatever it was walking on the bottom of the bayou.
Hmm.
And I said, okay. And I said, and how deep is this out here? He said it would have had to have been at least 8 or 9 feet tall.
8 or 9 feet tall. Yeah.
And it was just like, what did we just see? And
Yeah.
it's that moment where you get that chill up your back, and you're just kind of like, there's something really big out here that's really creepy, and now we don't know where it went.
Well, let's go back in time just a little bit. Back to the 80s when we began hearing the legends of Hogzilla. Remember that one?
Okay,
It
okay.
was it was again, we're right before cell phones and all the stuff. And you'd start getting people out of Georgia talking about, no kidding, I just saw a pig 8 feet long. I ain't never going back in the woods again. So we started hearing those legends.
Yeah.
And now we fast forward to modern era, and we know that some crazy person imported Siberian boars from Siberia. This is a pig big enough and bad enough to take on a tiger.
They're huge. They're
I
absolutely
mean, this
massive.
is a pig that really a tiger goes, I don't want bacon today.
Yeah.
Um,
They're huge. Like I said, I think I've told you this before. Stephanie's father, my second husband,
yeah,
he hunted. He was in the Coast Guard, and he came home one day and he says, "You're not going to believe what they got out there on the levee down there." And I said, "What?"
yeah,
I said, "I don't know. I'm from here. I might." Now you got to realize this guy. This guy was from Tennessee.
yeah.
He was from up in your neck of the woods, and he says this craziest thing. He says they got wild boar up there, and I said,
Yeah.
"Yeah, they do." And he says, "No, no, no, you don't understand." He goes,
No.
"This thing was as big as a
Hogzilla.
jeep, okay?
Yeah.
This thing was as big as a jeep." And I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, come on." He's like, "No, no, 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 you don't understand. This thing was as big as a jeep." And I was like, "You got to be kidding me." And he and his friends went up there and hunting, and he killed one, and he brought it back, and he had the head mounted. And the tusk on this thing were probably about the length of my hand. There it
Yeah.
is. Okay, the length of my hand from here. The
Yeah.
tusk. And I'm not a big fan by the way, of hunting or
Right.
mounting animals or displaying
Right.
them. I'm not into all that stuff. He was, but I was kind of skeeved out by it. But nonetheless, it was huge. I couldn't believe how
Yeah.
massive this thing
So,
was.
I mean,
Scary.
we have such a rich lore of cryptids, and the Jersey Devil, and every part of the country has its own kind of wild man, and flying pterosaurs and all this kind of stuff. And I was thinking about this before the show, and I was going, those are the best things you could run into these days.
That would be cool.
I mean, honestly, you think about it. Back in the '60s, we got fire ants.
Uh-huh.
There's a nice one. Great. Now we have a little tiny ant that can sting you, bite you, and eat you.
They didn't come
Uh,
along until the 60s?
yeah, they came in from the boats up out of South America. They began invading
Really?
Texas, South in the late 50s and early 60s. You know.
Well, yeah, that's about right. Well, I mean, because I was like, wait, when I was a little kid, I used to step in those things all the time. But yeah, that was
Yeah,
the 60s. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Come to
yeah,
think of it, yeah, it was the
yeah.
60s.
So we had
Yeah, that's
fire
crazy.
ants, and if you look at it today we have tilapia everywhere. It's from Africa. It's an aquarium fish.
I won't eat that
Um,
stuff. See, I didn't even know. I didn't even know that. I didn't know where that thing came. You see that all the time. Do you want some tilapia? And I'm like, I don't know, because we never had that around for. It's like give me some,
yeah.
give me some catfish or
Oh,
something. I'm
we're in the
familiar
South.
with,
Give
because
me
I don't know that
catfish.
other
Yeah.
stuff.
Over in Florida now, Burmese pythons, rock pythons, anacondas.
Oh
Where in the
yeah,
heck?
that's scary.
Um, Siberian boars, tegu lizards from Argentina,
Ah,
4 foot long carnivorous lizards. And
scary.
they're here.
Yes, I
They're
know. It's
here.
scary. It's
And I'm
hideous.
like, okay, I liked it better when I was looking for the boogeyman. Because now I'm more worried about running into a Siberian pig that,
I don't
you
ever
know,
want to see one of them
doesn't
things.
belong here. Of, so we get out looking at these cryptids, and, then we get into, well, from them we get into misidentification. And you and I had a running battle forever over, the goat sucker.
The Cooper Chopper, yeah.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
you and I were both watching the news articles out of Texas.
And
And
you were
finally,
right.
you send me one and you go, all right, there's one in front of a police camera.
I remember that. And he's running down the highway. He's like running,
Yeah.
running, running. Cop car going after him. Cams on. It was like, all right, we got him.
And
We
he
got
was,
it. We got one. We got one.
oh my God. I mean, it was a terrifying looking creature, wasn't it?
It was priceless. Yes, it was
And,
priceless.
but now does not diminish the fact of the chupacabra to actually know it exists.
There it
Now
was.
we
Yeah.
know we got them. And now we know what it is. It's half Mexican wolf, half American coyote. And unfortunately, it inherited bad things from both parents. And they suffer from mites horribly. And it makes their skin funny color. It makes them look weird. It makes them
Blue.
act
They're
weird.
blue.
Yeah.
Poor
Who,
things. I mean,
who
imagine
saw a
how.
naked blue dog running down the highway?
Yeah, but it's sad
That,
though. It's sad.
that's enough to
Those
make
poor
you need
animals.
therapy.
No, yeah, but those poor animals. They're probably in so much pain having that stuff. It's
Oh, but
horrible.
it's such a creature out of place. And then I'm going to look at commonly misconstrued creatures. Our favorite buddies in the whole world, raccoons.
Oh God, I
You
have
know,
ribbed you about. I have ribbed this man about raccoons for 15 years because he's always
easy.
going, "It's a raccoon," and I'm like, "It's not a raccoon." It's gotten to the point where if we do an investigation, before he even says it, I will say, "It's not. Do not say it's a raccoon. Not a raccoon. Not going to be a raccoon." Well, I had a demon in my tree. I
Guess
had a
what?
monster in my tree. I
You
had this
do.
big, gigantic thing. I pulled into my driveway, and I have seen 4 foot tall owls out here. I
Hmm.
have seen gigantic bald eagles, full
Yeah,
grown
I have
bald
seen an
eagles
eagle, and I
that
have
are
been
that are
visiting you
like
and
almost
seen
5 feet
bald eagles.
tall. I
Yes.
mean, eagles about as tall as I am. Just they just stand there and they just look at you, and it's like, oh my God, where did this thing come from? I mean, so I'm used to animals. I live near the swamp, and there's these red eyes. I'm out feeding the outside
Yeah.
cats. I got some feral cats that I feed, and I'm feeding them. And I hear some rustling, and it's a big rustle. It's not the cat. It's not a squirrel.
No.
And I look in the oak tree, and I see these red eyes just glaring at me, and it was like, oh my God, what is it? And I'm outside, and I'm like, I move, it moves.
Mm-hmm.
I move backwards, it crept a little bit forward.
Mm-hmm.
And there it is in the big tree, about 5 feet ahead of me, and it's staring at me, and it's just
Yes.
moving in closer, little by little. I see these red eyes. I see these red eyes, and I was like, oh my God, I gotta get out of here. So I run in the house.
Mm-hmm.
he says it's a raccoon. It's like, it was not a raccoon. I have never. So I've lived out here since 2003. I have seen armadillos. We had a resident possum that lived out here.
Yeah,
I'd see him
yeah,
every night waddling around because he was so fat from eating everything in sight. Never saw any raccoons. Now I've seen raccoons in other little towns.
right,
I've seen
right.
I've seen raccoons in City Park in downtown New Orleans. I mean, the
Yeah,
raccoons. There's a huge raccoon population that intermingle with people in this area. I mean, I used to sit in my house that I had in Kenner, and
yeah,
the glass door, you'd see the raccoons come up and eat the dog food, and it'd be
yeah,
like, oh, there they are. And so it's not uncommon to raccoons. It was like, I've never seen, oddly enough, a raccoon out here. Usually they stay over in the woods. So I'm like, it's not a raccoon. Well, I'm out there the next night and I'm calling the cats, shaking the bag of cat food, and I see one kitty come from my neighbor's house and he's climbing the fence, and I'm thinking it's this one particular feral cat. And I'm going, come here, kitty, kitty, come here, kitty, kitty, kitty. Well, here comes this little chubby chunk of little fur come up, waddling up like
hmm
this. And I had to call Allan and say, well, I found your raccoon. Because this little thing, yeah, he was eating the cat's food, and
yeah,
he was the one spying on me the whole time with the little red eyes. And he's not real big. He's about, maybe, the size. He's bigger than a cat, but he's,
yeah.
about the size of a small dog, medium sized dog. He's not a full grown one. But this little thing, and now I can't seem to get rid of him.
Mm-mm.
Um,
Well, a job site I'm working on right now, we're recovering an abandoned property, clearing it out and trying to get it, bring it back. And something kept messing with our tools and supplies. So we put out a trail cam. See what, if somebody was getting on the property or something like that. Instead, this is what we got.
so
Oh yeah,
funny.
got
Oh, but
two
they're
of them
cute.
trying
You
to
gotta admit
raid
they're
the little
cute.
bird thingy down there with some wet bird food in it, and got one of her trying to steal the trail cam.
They're so cute. It really is.
And
They are cute. They're very smart. It's amazing how smart
oh, oh,
these are. The
you said
animals are
smart.
so smart. Show the
Oh
yeah.
no, here we go. Let me show you how smart these guys can get. Oh, oh yeah, oh yeah.
I
We
was
wonder what happened to
amazed.
all the bird food.
Well, that's it. I was when it was having all the cat food. It was like, what are you? How much you guys eating? It's like, how are y'all eating? And I know you eat at other people's houses. Like, what are y'all doing with
Oh
the
yeah,
food? And now I know a little, chunky guy out there. He's got it. But the weirdest thing last night, I'm kind of scared of him. And he comes running up, and I'm like, I don't want him getting too close because I don't want him to get crazy and bite me, or if he gets spooked or
right.
something, he might bite. So I kind of tap, the car, like hit it to make a loud noise
Yeah.
to make him run. And he goes taking off, and he usually just jumps right over the fence in my neighbor's yard. And he made like a little turn. He turned
Mm-hmm.
around. I'm like, where did he go? What's he doing? What is this thing gonna do? And I kind of stepped up a little bit, and I'm watching him, and I see him jump from a tree to the wooden fence, and the next thing I know, he's up on my roof. Now I have heard things on my roof before. It sounded like like a giant, like some big guy, boom, boom, boom on my roof, and I'm like, what in the world is that? Oh my God.
Yeah.
Something's going to
Sound like
come
they're wearing
caving in
army
through the.
boots.
Yeah, yeah, and it was apparently this thing. And I'm like, why is he going? The food's out here. Here's the food. He knows I'm going to leave it. And he's tearing off over the top of my house, taking off in the other direction. I live in a
Mm-hmm.
one-story house, and he's tearing off down the other way. And I was like, what? Why is he leaving the food? And it was like, okay, whatever. And then I, finished putting the food out for the cats, and I walk around the front of my van, and I see him. He actually like jumped on the house, ran across the roof, got down the other side of the fence, and was gonna sneak back up around so that I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't see him. And I caught him, and I was like, why are you doing this? What are you doing? It was like, what are you doing?
Now,
So that was
picture
really
the
funny.
person that's not used to this, and it sounds like Bigfoot is walking through your attic.
Oh yeah, somebody could have called the police and said somebody's on my
Easily.
roof.
Somebody's
Because
trying
what
to
it
break
sounded
into
like,
my house.
what it sounded like, he sounds exactly like what it has sounded like when the guy comes out to check the solar panels.
Yeah.
When they're up there walking around dealing with the solar panels, that's what it sounds like, a male big guy walking around out
Yeah.
there checking my solar panels. Only it's this little thing, this little furball
Well,
that's
and,
up there.
welcome to so much of the cryptid experience, because if you're not familiar with what a squirrel or a raccoon or an armadillo or any of these things can actually do, you don't know these sounds they can make. You don't know how heavy they can run across your roof.
I was amazed. I
Um,
couldn't believe it because I was like, who's on my roof at this time of night? What in the world is going
oh,
on? And this thing can't be that big. He's maybe the size of, I don't know, maybe a 25, 30-pound dog. He's not huge.
well,
And
and
he's
he
probably
probably
don't even
only
weigh
weighs
that
five
much. He's all
pounds.
fur. Huh?
Yeah. And well, picture 4 feet up in your hedge in the middle of the night with low light. You see those eyes glowing back red at you, 4 or 5 feet off the ground, or 8 feet
That's,
off the ground in a
oh yeah,
tree.
that freaks you out. Yeah, it freaks you out because you don't
Well,
know what it is.
honestly, you just heard Bigfoot run across your roof. You walk out in the backyard to see what's out there, and you see a pair of red eyes glowing at you 6 feet in the air from the back fence.
Yeah, and if I wouldn't have grown up out here and have seen that kind of stuff, I mean, I saw worse things in my yard because it was a lot more
Oh
rural
yeah, but
back then, and being a little kid, like you said, with the little rain boots on going out there, you see
yeah,
this thing going, oh, I've seen worse things. But if I wouldn't have grown up around that, looking out my window and seeing little red eyes looking at me all night long anyway, I wouldn't have known what that was. If somebody came here from somewhere else where they weren't used to that kind of wildlife, it would probably freak them out.
yeah.
I
I
would
mean,
think they would be
you
terrified.
truly want a scary story? Be somewhere alone at night with something you can't find making noises.
No, it was weird because all I could think of was I know nobody's up there checking the solar panels, and what kept thinking was, did something like come through my roof and it's in my attic? Because you can't tell where
Is
it's
it
at. You
in my
just hear
house
it.
with me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you hear it moving, you hear it walking, it's above you, but it's like I can't tell if it's actually on the roof or if it's in the attic, and is it going to drop out the attic door like in the middle of the night? Like it could hit the attic door pop open. It's like, oh my god, what's up there?
I mean, welcome to your house has a demon. You
There you
see
go.
now. Well,
Yeah.
I always start at
This is
critters.
why you always say, he would always say, okay, I got to rule out the raccoon thing. And I was like, oh, for God's sakes, it's not a raccoon. So now I have to say, well, yeah, we got the raccoon. We got it.
Now you have to go. All right, let's rule out raccoons, squirrels, critters, thingies, bats. You got to rule out a lot of stuff before you get to anything
Supernatural.
supernatural anymore. Because
No, you do.
now, I mean, now the critters, we got critters from everywhere. And somebody could honestly say, I saw a kangaroo. I could not argue with them these days. I
You
would have to
could.
look
Well,
at them
yeah,
and
and
go,
it could
really,
have been
where did it
imported
go?
in.
You know,
Yeah, it could have been imported in. And now that you mentioned it, there is still a wildlife place on the North Shore, and it's probably where all the emus went. There's a place where they go and they
mm,
ride the wagon, and the kids can feed the animals with the
right.
little cups of corn. They've got one, and it's just they're like roaming free on all this acreage. So that's probably where they all wound up.
Yeah.
But we still don't have an answer as to what that thing was in the fog over the Honey Island swamp. And I'm going to put it out there. If anybody's got any suggestions and can tell me what they think this might have been, a logical or illogical explanation of what I saw, because it's like 25, 30 years later and I still don't know what I saw, message me. Message me. I'm on Facebook, Kalila1. You can always come to the page, Scary Stories with Kalila. You can go to KalilaSmith.com and email
Yeah.
me. And Allan, you're all over the place. Allan has all kind of other shows too. Um,
Yes, yes.
that
The
he's
biggest
on.
thing to do is just catch me at geekysidetv.com. That is the best place in the world. I produce a number of television shows of, but of, just the cryptid experience alone, I got to tell you, has got to be one of the most terrifying things you can experience, whether it turns out to be the Honey Island swamp monster or your neighbor's cat. It is a truly, I mean, when you don't know what something is and you know it is in there with you or you think it's around you, it is a terrifying experience.
Oh yeah, yeah. The most terrifying thing for me was that, and thank God it didn't happen. Was I could have so easily hit that thing. Then what?
Yeah.
Then what? I mean, he probably would have ripped the van open like a tin can and shook me like a rag doll. Who knows? But thank God it didn't happen because everybody was like, "Why didn't you go back?" And I was like, "Cause I'm not
Nah,
crazy." It's like,
I'm good.
"Oh no, no, no,
I'm
no,
good.
no, 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 no." It's like, "Oh no, no, I'm not stupid." But and on a clear night I might have, but on a clear night I might have seen what it really was. But to this day, many, many years later, and I've researched it, that thing still haunts me
Yeah.
because I don't know what it was. And I wish that somebody could say, "Hey, this is it," and because everything I've seen with
Yeah.
Bigfoot, it still doesn't match the color that I
They may
saw, and
not. I
it's
mean, welcome
it
to the
was
cryptid
bizarre.
experience. You may never know what it was.
But I want to know. I really want to know. So somebody's
Well,
out there. If
we
anybody's got
might
any
have to.
good guesses, call me, contact me, send me an email. I'd love to hear what you got to say about what you think this is. But
Well,
anyway,
we may have to sneak back out there again sometime soon.
oh gosh, yeah, no, no, no. You sneak back out there. I'll stay in the car. There's no way I'm sneaking back out there. No.
I'll make sure
It's
I have a web.
creepy.
I'll have a
It's
webcam on you. You can
creepy.
watch from home.
Yeah, yeah. That's the way that would be. There's no way I'm going out in those woods. That's
Mm,
scary. All
mm.
right, guys. Well, we're pretty much at the end of the show. Thank you all for tuning in for Scary Stories with Kalila. Um, Thank you, Allan, for joining me. This has been a lot
My
of
pleasure.
fun. And stay tuned for more episodes of Scary Stories with Kalila coming to you very soon. Have a wonderful night, folks. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.